Welcome to Tuesday night. I got this message from a patient into the portal, into the YouTube about 4 months ago. And he writes in and says, I just went to the doctor about my chronic hip issues. He emphasized my need to lose weight as a major part of dealing with it. I tipped the scales at 269 pounds and went home and immediately started a 72-hour sardine fast. I ended last night, and this morning I weighed 259 pounds. And the first comment in that message was somebody saying, 10 pounds seems like a tall tale. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that is so simple, you will think it's fake. And this sardine challenge is more than just weight loss, like what this guy was looking for. I wish I had been using this for my patients for the last 15 years in my clinic. Tonight's story is going to be a case study about somebody who's near and dear to me. This patient has been in my life for many years, and her story teaches how this is way more than just weight loss. Stick around for what the inside scoop is, and there's some pretty good announcements. You're going to want to stick around for the end. Let me show you my numbers, and we will say thank you to all those that have already checked in. Oh, the numbers just went away. It's just my luck. I am fasting since after church on Sunday. I did get in a workout, 2 workouts actually, and a sauna. Not the hardest of workouts. I'm traveling this week to San Diego for Low Carb San Diego, and if any of you guys are going to be there, my ketones are 3.6. I think the glucose was 78, but I gotta check. Hold tight, almost there. Yeah, 78 glucose, ketones 3.6. And again, that's after about 65 hours of fasting. I will say hi to anybody that is traveling to San Diego for the low carb San Diego. My speech is on Friday, so I will be there on Thursday and Friday. And then I have a treat where I haven't done this in years. I take a red-eye airplane on Friday night to Washington, D.C., and move my son into Georgetown Law School. He starts next week. So praise for him, really big accomplishment for him, and we are excited to see where he goes next. But as a mom, I did not want to miss that. So if you are going to Low Carb San Diego, check me out Friday. I'll be all around, and I'll be there on Thursday afternoon as well. Let's get started with this lecture. It is one that I do want to do an excellent job on and have some updates that, I hope you can take these lessons and internalize them for what is happening in your world. Let's get over to our case. So we have this female who has acute pain. And what acute pain means is, she has a little bit of a problem of pain, and she treats it just like any other acute pain. You wake up with a back pain and say, that's going to go away tomorrow. And when it didn't go away after, 4 or 5 days, well, she said, well, maybe I should do something about it. So she went to a chiropractor. That didn't help much. A few days later, she went to the physical therapist. That didn't help it. She then added a massage therapist. That didn't do much. She was using some ibuprofen. And that acute pain it was definitely wrecking her world. This had never happened before. And if I got to look behind the scenes, I would say, well, there were a few hints that life wasn't perfect, but just a few, not a lot of them. And at this point, you say, you can make all that go away with these stinky fish. Just do it for 3 days. And that was a big no. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that at all. Those things are stinky. That sounds terrible. That looks like fish bait. No way. And then life got a little worse. Her little bitty acute pain, which really was in the lower part of her spine, had started out with, I'm going to switch this over so you can see that picture a little better. Started out with just that, probably a tear in something. It was not that exciting, and it had a response from the rest of her body by sending in these things called cytokines. I've talked about this before. If you remember the cytokine storm that was really a big part of the COVID literature, it's because the body's responding. This is your defense system. It's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. And in acute pain, or this short-term pain, it goes to the spot where there's a problem, and then it attracts the rest of the defense system that should fix it, and then it goes away. But that's not what happened in this woman. this is what happened. She kept collecting more and more and more and more of these little cytokines, and the pain never really went away. And as that got a little bit worse, she said, well, I'm doing the ketogenic diet. I don't have that many carbs, but her pain got worse, pain got worse, pain got worse. Maybe she took a few ketones, had a few ketones, but nothing enough to reverse this. And in the meantime, she now had moved to chronic pain. So chronic pain, she added a few other things. She started doing, let's get this here. She had a foam roller that she was using every day before she got out of bed. The stiffness was so much that she couldn't exit bed without doing that. The next thing she said was, let's try something called dry needling. And that seemed to help a little, but it's kind of like an advanced form of acupuncture. And sometimes it really does just kind of break the cycle of pain, but it wasn't happening. It was very minimal difference, actually. I mean, it would help a little bit, but it just wouldn't last. So then she said, let's try modern medicine. Let's go to a pain clinic. And the pain clinic did an MRI. The MRI said, yeah, we can see that there's this little bulging disc. The bulging disc was not a lot. And so they said, well, we're not sure if that's the cause of this. And there's a little trick we can do. We can give you a steroid injection in the area where we think the problem is coming from. And if it makes the pain go away, well, sometimes it stays away. So that would be awesome. But even if it only takes the pain away for a couple of weeks or, maybe 6 weeks, at least we know that that's where the problem's coming from. So there's a little bit of diagnostic clue in there and sometimes a complete reversal. So she does this steroid shot 3 times, steroid shot 3 times. And at the most, she got 10 days of relief, and then it came back. So she starts adding other things. She adds a TENS unit, says I do that every once in a while. She added gabapentin. That was helping her sleep a little bit. She did a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. She did some plyotherapy. By now, she's got several modalities involved in trying to get this pain to go away, that it's nearly a full-time job. And of course, the problem with this story is it's 10 months later, and you do not need to be a doctor to know something terrible is happening. That just the look of fatigue in her face, the look of unhealth, of unwell in her face it was shocking. I mean, she could sit in the chair and before she ever got up to show you that she has an abnormal gait because of the pain in her back, just the posture in the chair would get your attention to say, uh-oh, something's wrong. And she goes from being a 50-year-old woman to a 50-year-old woman who's aging very fast. And in this midst is the danger of what's behind all chronic problems, but especially metabolic problems. Let me show you the other things that were happening to her. So she had that cytokine, that storm that had come in, and it wouldn't move away. And she had recruited a bunch of, she had pain for a long time. But the other thing that was rising in her story is cortisol. Cortisol is going to happen whenever you have pain, and then it should go back down. You should shoot it up, and then it should go back down. But the chronic nature of this kept notching up her cortisol. So that was causing her blood sugar to be high. She wasn't making hardly any ketones. And of course, cortisol is disruptive to your sleep. So now she's got a disturbed sleep pattern, really not shutting that brain down at all. And that's altering her concentration, and her performance at work is probably not the best she's had in years. She's struggling to, keep her attitude positive. And she's starting to doubt that she's ever going to get better. And there is where the real troubles come from. This is what I see in patients. She has this low BDNF. If you've never heard me talk about BDNF, this is one of those, miracle grow things for the brain. If your brain is suffering with, practically anything, adding BDNF will help repair it, will help restore it. But where do you make BDNF? You make it when you're sleeping. That 5th, 6th, and 7th hour of sleep is the best restoration of BDNF. If you had a brain injury, if you had a head injury, you'd need BDNF to repair it. If you got your mood to go a little wonky and we're trying to get it back to normal, you'd add BDNF. You can get it when you have some exercise. Well, she can't do that. She can hardly walk. But she also is having these other issues of sleep and the rise in cortisol. All of them are compounding. And finally, the hardest part is those white blood cells are supposed to sweep in after the cytokines and help repair things. But her white blood cells are worn out. They are tired. They don't do the job they're supposed to. I like to think of it as it's just a crumple of the immune system. It no longer goes to the places it's supposed to take care of problems. It also starts to make mistakes and go places that it's not supposed to go. And that immune system is, again, related to cortisol, related to those cytokines. It gets better if you get some sleep, clearly linked to the BDNF. And once again, you say, what about the changes in the way the woman feels? What about how long she can put up with this? Because she is now emotionally fatigued. She is so tired, and that brain is so foggy that she's really learned helplessness. You're like, wait a minute, this is a strong woman who's never had to rely on hardly anybody in her life, and suddenly something has happened. So it's not just that the desperation that she's gone through of all of these different things, from chiropractor to massage therapist to TENS units to injections of steroids. She's got this laundry list of things where she's tried. And in her brain, she says, I failed, I failed, I failed. And what's really happened is that there is a lot more chemistry going on in the background. And then the chemistry led to a mood problem, and the mood problem led to a hope problem. And now we are stuck with this. I don't know. I would love to see in the comments if you've ever read this book. It came out in 2003. Let me go back to this Loom slide. It came out in 2003. It's called The Paradox of Choice and Why More is Less. The book is an excellent example of today's problems that start with, we have this multitude of choices and we think it makes our life better, but it gives us less. And we have this decision fatigue that sets in when there are far too many choices in front of us. It then talks further about getting into the psychological stress that happens on what we do with an excessive amount of choices. And that excessive amount of choices leads to learned helplessness. Let me tell you about a study that he talks about in there that expresses the learned helplessness. So they look at 3 groups of mice where learned helplessness is what they're studying. So you have the first group of mice, and all of the mice are going to be put into a setting where there's an electrical current that comes through the floor, and they have to escape it. They have to jump over a barrier to get away from it. So the first mice have never seen anything like this. They get this electrical shock, and the mice are trying to scramble around and figure out how to do it. And as soon as one of them figures it out, then the next one figures it out, and then all of the mice eventually figure it out. The second group of mice have been in a similar situation with a slightly different scenario that they had to escape from, and they can transfer that knowledge to this setting where they're getting electrical shock, and they learn it much faster than group 1 did. So their past experiences did help them, but they were also had a rapid learning effect by the first one who figured it out. The third group of mice has been in a setting where electrical shock was run through them and they couldn't escape. So again, a very similar setting, not exactly the same, but they could not escape. They tried and tried and tried and tried and tried, and nobody succeeded. And by the end, they now put them in this experiment, and the mice in the third group never figured it out. Not one of them ever figured it out. They had learned helplessness. And this same scenario happens in patients when their attempts to improve life, and of course I get the scene in medicine, they've tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and tried, and now they have learned that things aren't the same. Behavior and thinking that happened with learned helplessness is happening because of the multitude of choices that they have. And here comes the kicker. Watch this. Go back to my slides. When you look at the paradox of choice and this multitude of choices, it was the excessive choices that landed on the learned helplessness. And I see this all the time with weight loss. When patients come in and say, I can't lose weight, I can't lose weight, I can't lose weight, there are some really important things if you want to help this patient get out of that spiral, which is a lot psychological. So this man who wrote in and said, my doc said, I need this hip replaced, but I have to lose the weight. And I did this thing. And he did the 72-hour challenge, and he lost 10 pounds in 3 days. And of course, that wasn't just fat. That was a whole bunch of those cytokines and inflammation. He changed the chemistry, but the power was that he had success quickly, that his struggle has been failure, failure, failure. And giving them that success early is super important, not just for, their hip and pain, but for the psychology of saying, no, 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 this plan will work. And then for the first comment to be negative, to say, oh, sounds far-fetched. I hear this all the time. The sardine is so simple. The sardines challenge is so simple, it must be fake. And I contend that when you simplify the plan for patients, it's not just simplifying the chemistry or simplifying their emotional setting. The chaos in their brain gets to stop saying, quit leaning on so many choices. It's paralyzing your efforts. It's actually paralyzing your white blood cells. I need you to back up and listen to me. So let's take a look at what happened with this patient. I'm going to go to this one because I need the next slide. So here was, let's see if you can see that. It's kind of small on this one. I wonder if you can see that. I will point out what you're supposed to look at here. So on this patient, this is back from, one more time. This is back from November of last year. And if you can see, really tiny, I know that's small, 96 blood sugar, and her ketones are 0.0. So that Dr. Boz ratio is infinity. And this is when she's really having a tough time. It's when the cortisol is rising. You'll notice that this is at 6:50 in the morning. Her blood sugar is over 100 there. That's never happened to her before. Those ketones are like non-existent. We now get to the end of December, November, early December. We've got a 90 and a 0.1. We get into the first section of January, end of January now, and we're still ketones at 0. She is now getting her MRI. This is when the shots are coming in. And she says, okay, let me try again. I mean, incredible diligence here. When you look at the early part of February, she's still got a Dr. Boz ratio of over 1,000. She gets into March, and again, she's now still in the 90s. Morning ketones, they're terrible. She may be eating a ketogenic diet, but she is not using the chemistry to try and sweep away this inflammation. And the problem isn't just growing in her back. It's growing in all parts, in her heart, in her brain, in her face, in the atrophy of muscles, because she can't function right. This goes on for a couple more slides. I do think it's just worthy of saying how hard she tried. She did start cutting carbs and has a few of those, morning fasting sugars, at least out of the 90s and into the 70s, but the ketones are offline. She can't make a 1. Okay. All right, you get my point. Again, what's really happened behind the scenes is that cytokine storm that used to be, this just limited to here. Now you have cytokines that are everywhere, and they have started to inflame and indurate, and there's scar tissue involved. That even when a tiny ketone gets to the area of this wound, it just hardly makes a difference. It's so inundated with chronic inflammation. It's gooey. It's sticky. It's not going to reverse in a day. And here comes our simple solution again. And this time, she still doesn't want to do it. Like, oh my goodness, there has to be something more. But the simplified plan is what we are selling here. The simplified plan is what we're saying. You're going to need a few people saying nice things to you. You're going to see a few people helping you with the win. But you have to find success in this process, because even if I send you to surgery right now, whatever's causing this pain has now lit a fire throughout her body. And just like this man who's going to have a hip replacement at 269 pounds, he is going to need to fix the inflammation, no matter if he has a new hip or an old hip. And he needs a few wins under his belt to do that. Let me go here. Go back to Loom slides here. I need this one. So this is what happens in the 21 day. As we take on a 19-day timeline down here, 21 days is total, but we start tracking on Wednesday. When we took a group of students, we said their average, this is the average for all 200 students, their average blood sugar was over 100 when we started this. And just like our other patient, their average ketones were, well, less than 0.6. As we got them through the first week, the first challenge happened right here where they started to eat sardines at the beginning of the 72-hour fast. They had the last bite of sardines at the end of the 72-hour fast, and you could see that ketone response rise, 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 rise. The next week, we did another challenge where we did a water fast. And I contend you would not have seen this type of response in a water fast in these chronically inflamed patients if we hadn't first primed their metabolism with a sardine fast. And there is something in the simplicity of this, where it's all you can eat. You don't have to deny yourself food. You just only get this food for 3 days. And there's more than just weight loss happening here. There's more than just removal of that. A week of sardines in our patient looks like this. So about a week ago, she had been around folks trying to be in a ketogenic state, and she had some, thank God, had some success. She got the ketones above 0.1, and she finally got a Dr. Boz ratio under 100. But then she finally said, okay, I'll try your damn sardines. And she ate a can of sardines, and the next morning she woke up, blood sugar was down to 71 and her ketones were 3.4. We now have a Dr. Boz ratio of 21. And I don't know if you could say the word impressed yet, but she's willing to do another day. So she gets up the next day. She eats only sardines for the next day. And again, those ketones pump high. We've now got a Dr. Boz ratio of 20. This is a really important part for the antidote of cortisol, the antidote of those white blood cells being crippled. And now on the next day, she's again has ketones higher than she's ever seen them. We now have a Dr. Boz ratio under 20. That is bragging rights around here. That is definitely bragging rights around here. And now the next day she says, I think I can be done. I think this is my last day of sardines. And indeed, she woke up with pretty good numbers and then said, meh. I'm good, right? This is good. I did a good job. And what happened the next day? Blood sugars went back up. Ketones are a little lower. And here's where the truth comes in. Her ketones went back down to 0.9. Dr. Boz ratio is now over almost 100 again. And on the final day, that blood sugar stabilized, not terrible blood sugar, but now those ketones are 0.6 and the Dr. Boz ratio is 140. And deep inside her system, we know that there might not be as bad of a problem. But when I look at that chronic antidote for having reversal of pain, when I look at that chronic nature at which metabolism is broken to put on enough weight to be 269 pounds, there is way more under the hood than you're going to need. When I look at the benefits of what a sardine fast has done for my patients, I will tell you that it's way more than just eating sardines. That the two things that I really want you to remember from this lecture, I guess it is number one, when you've had learned failure, when you've had failure over and over and over again, and you're in America, where the options for medical care are abundant. One of my husband's favorite ways to say, when you want to know how to kill a best friend, you call their doctor the day before you see them and you tell the doctor that they're lazy. And they'll order so many tests the next day just to compensate for saying, I'm not lazy, I'm a good doctor, I can do all these things. And he's not so far off. Because looking at all of those procedures, we now have labels, and those labels come with prescriptions and options and an incredible amount of, I can throw some water on that problem. But the reversal of these chronic medical problems, whether it's a pain syndrome, whether it's a hip pain, whether it's metabolic problems, they first come with simplify the plan, take away the noise, and focus on one thing that will give you success. But the second thing is to be in a community of people that are also working on the same thing. And one of the reasons that, the success happened for this patient was that she got in a group of other people saying, no, I'm telling you, you cannot have that at night. You can't afford to have that at night. You can't eat after the sun goes down. You've got to even stop eating earlier than that. And yes, everybody that's around you has figured out how to eat sardines, not because we like them, but because I can see that the aging of that woman in a decade, in 1 year. And I love her. I don't want that to happen to her at all. And the simplicity of reversing this medical problem, well, it means the difference between 60 years old and dementia, 60 years old and chronic inflammation that started out as a cute little back pain problem and now cripples her. She can't do the things that a 60-year-old woman is supposed to get to enjoy. The reversal is simple. It isn't fun. It isn't this lovely menu, but I can't tell you the number of patients who've said, I'm off the medications. I'm no longer shackled to my doctor because I went from step 1 to step 2. And in the things that we offer to this community of the ketogenic space, I do my best to be an awesome educator for free right here on YouTube. And I use stories like this to say they're real. It is nasty what happens next. Ask me how I know. 25 years of writing the 15 prescriptions that it will take to keep that 60-year-old out of a nursing home, and it won't be pretty. It will be awful. It will be awful. But this simple act of sardines only will push that inflammation up, wring out that problem, and gives her the hope, gives her the success where she can start to believe that this is reversible. All right, I have a couple of announcements to make. I do want to see your questions that are coming online. I am going to say a couple of things. First of all, if you've been following the channel for a couple of weeks, you know that we have a problem with our raspberry BHB, that the raspberry BHB has suffered the consequences of what heat does to any powder that has a lot of ketones in it. We're super proud of the fact that we have the highest ketones in any scoop of any ketone powder out there. It's called raspberry BHB, but it's hardened on us. So we have to do a little bit of a fire sale. We're selling these for 2 for $100, which is the cheapest you're going to see it. We actually had this announcement before this happened to us that we're going to have to raise prices on our product. And so we want the people who tune into this channel to have as many benefits as possible. And this sale is now available on our website that, well, we hope you take advantage of it. It is not bad. It's been safety tested. And we really are excited about those of you that tune in this far to be able to enjoy the ketones in a can. This woman, we used this the first 5 days before she really cut the carbs, saying 2 to 3 doses of this a day will get that transition to be easier. And the second thing we've been talking about on the channel is we do have a wonderful sale or wonderful sales cycle for getting our 200 students in the 21-day metabolic kick. This is the twice a year Super Bowl that we run on the Dr. Boz show, where we really teach you how to reverse medical problems. And that's not gentle. Oops, I do not want to. Would you like the secret cliff notes that I use to help patients? Oh, that's naughty. Let me try that again. That 21 day is starting the week after Labor Day. That's when we start it every year. We also do it the third week, the fourth week in January after that holiday. We find that these 2 times a year give patients the sprint and the community that they need to do this difficult thing, this level up of their metabolism, this real sardine challenge for 72 hours. And those numbers that patient checked for the past year, you can see she did a pretty good job of checking all year long. But when you share those in a room and yours are the lowest, and you know there's a couple ways that you can boost them, we will do it with you. We will teach you how to do this. This is the first time that I've talked about what we're doing after that class this year. Last year we did an experiment with folks that were interested to have a prescription for a GLP-1. Because just like this woman, I think I think she can reverse it without anything extra, with just following a strict ketogenic diet that pushes her ketones that high. And yes, they would involve sardines. The reason for that is the simplicity of it. Quit putting so much chaos and noise, quit putting so many options in her brain, and give her success. Get her out of the multiple choices, get her out of the learned helplessness. But there are some people, like I would bet that 269-pound patient, when he lost the 10 pounds, let's hope that discouragement in that comment didn't stop him from trying it again. It didn't remove his belief that, no, this is way more than weight loss. This is way more than what your body's needing. Keep going. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Today Show where they wrote an article about one of our coaches and one of our cheerleaders who did sardines for over 100 days to reverse her plantar fasciitis, something that everybody told her she was going to need to quit her job for, and she was going to need to have surgery for. And she reversed plantar fasciitis. Like, it's been gone. It hasn't come back. And in her case, it took 100 days of sardines. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do that, but I am saying that that's how desperate she was to say, please, I do not want the next chapter. And she really did reverse several chronic problems, but specifically one that has a terrible treatment profile. Like, I don't know if you've ever put a needle in the bottom of your foot, but surgery around that area is not much nicer. And the truth is it's not going to fix the problem. It was going to inflame it, try and give an antidote and not reverse it. What this advanced ketogenic diet does is reverse problems. And we know that some people are going to need some help. So we have said that for the 200 people that come into this class, there will be an extended bonus for anybody who completes the class. That means you figured this out, you learned the lessons that we were teaching in this class, and now we will do 12 weeks of in our medical clinic of a supervised tirzepatide, which is the GLP-1 plus the GIP hormones that are given in microdoses when people are in advanced ketosis. We will help you with this for 12 weeks. And the best part of that program is at the end, we will, based on what we see your results are, we will write a referral letter to your primary care saying, dear primary care, we have followed this patient. We have put them in advanced ketosis. Here's what we've seen as a reversal of their medical problems. Here's what we've seen when we sprinkled a little bit of GLP-1 on their case. And here's why we think you, their primary care physician, should be writing this for the patient. All the time we see patients write in saying, my doctor won't do it. My doctor won't do it. Well, guess what happens when a medical doctor writes the referral for another medical doctor? It changes the paradigm, especially when you show up to that doctor with these things that aren't in a textbook. You just reversed the chronic inflammation in your back. You just reversed the hip pain that you were going to get your hip replaced for. You just reversed the plantar fasciitis that everybody says you can't. You just reversed the autoimmune problem that every textbook says you're going to need an immune modulator. You're going to need to be on steroids. You're going to need to be on drugs that actually make the problem worse, while making the short-term symptoms a little better, but not fix the problem. And I really hesitated before I said I would do this, but I just can't believe some of the outcomes that happened with the first group of patients. And again, thank you everybody who did the program the first time. We learned a lot. We made a lot of corrections. We're going to do a few things differently, but you taught us not only how amazing the reversal of these chronic medical problems were if you do the tiny doses of GLP-1 when they're in this advanced state of ketosis. Remember that chart that I showed you was the average blood sugars for all 200 students over those 19 days. And it's 19 days because we don't start checking until synchronizing until that Wednesday. But we look at everybody's blood sugar and everybody's ketones. And as a group of 200 people, that result is amazing. That is incredible. And when we then sprinkled on a GLP-1 for people who have the chronic problems, who are better, but they've got a long haul ahead of them, and they really do need the backing of their primary care to get, they don't need me from the middle of Florida, nowhere, telling them what to do. They need their primary care seeing with his or her own eyes, this is what can happen with an advanced ketogenic diet. And if they still haven't got the reversal of those problems, adding a GLP-1 for an additional 12 weeks, it's brilliant. So not everybody needs to do that. Not everybody needs one of those. But by the end of those 21 days, we are often pretty skilled at saying, you're going to benefit from that. You're going to benefit from that. And then, the call is always yours. All right, let's get to those questions. Again, we will close the cart when all 200 of those seats are sold. We have a few dozen left. We've had a really good sales so far, so I'm excited to meet the new students and watch what they have to say. All right, let's start with Deb H. Why would blood glucose and ketones response be so much more favorable on a butter fast than a sardine fast? For the first time ever, my blood glucose went below 70 and ketones went above 6 on day 5 of a butter fast. So I'm just going to make sure Deb's saying this, that she had only butter for 5 days. And that's a great question. So when you're looking at somebody's response to boosting glucose or boosting ketones and dropping their glucose, a straight fat diet is going to be the biggest prime. I mean, if you want the fastest and the most robust, it's just not the tastiest. It is an MCT C8C10 oil. So that fat is the quickest one to hop into the liver, turn into ketones, and then you just flood the body with ketones because the fat has that preference for hopping in the liver and then transferring many of those strings of fat into ketones. Not all of them, but many of them. Some of them, like I've told before, have, she just responded, yes, I only had butter. So she's got fat that isn't, some of the fat is butyrate, that's found in butter, that's what's actually in ghee. So that's a 2-chain carbon that really quickly turns into beta hydroxybutyrate. But there's only 2 carbons in it, so there's not a lot of energy in that. And then she has some saturated fat. Well, the saturated fat has to go into the lymph system, be sorted out on whether it's toxic or not, and then the body will decide where it goes. If the sugar is low, if the glucose has not been stimulated and the insulin is not chronically elevated, you'll see that fat go into circulation and it will end up in the liver, just like that C8C10, and you'll make a bunch of ketones from it. It'll take a few days to do that. So she says by day, my first time ever, blood glucose went below 70 and her ketones above 6 on day 5. So 5 days of only eating butter. And that transformation of lowering the blood sugar, only having fatty acids and ketones available for the fresh the fresh replacement of resources through your mouth, dropped her blood glucose and raised the ketones. When adding sardines, there's protein. First of all, there's usually different fat, so whatever, saturated fat, omega-3s, different ways that it will turn into ketones. But when fat is mixed with protein, it's going to have a different surge. So the reason you've seen me eat butter. I think it's an excellent way to teach patients what satiety really feels like. And it's delicious. It's delicious. There's just no other word for it. I don't have to talk them into eating sardine or to eating butter. I do usually have to talk them into eating sardines. So the sustainable change for somebody eating strictly fat is you'll have a deficit of your amino acids eventually. I can say over and over again, 72-hour sardine fasts for 8 consecutive weeks has healed, and I mean healed, patients over and over again. And it is a solid sardines for the first bite, a can of sardines at the 72nd hour, and it's for the win. They really do have an amazing transformation. And I can recommend that without worrying about a protein loss. So that's, it's chemistry that's showing you why the numbers did it that way. And I'm really happy you had success with it, actually. I still would recommend some protein in there. Obviously, it's wonderful once they have that barrier, they kind of hop over that the blood glucose did come down, the ketones are on fire, and they don't need to go that high. When people overshoot ketones, it does show me that this was a new stress to their metabolism. Go back to our patient. Let's see if I can go back to her numbers here. Let's see if I can put them back on the slides here. When I looked at her, the ketones at the beginning of the week, and then they shot up so high on sardines, that's an overshoot. That's exactly what this patient's doing with butter. Ketones of 3.5 getting up to 4.7. What it tells me is she hasn't ever stressed her metabolism like this in the recent weeks. Let me just show that slide again quick. Yeah, so when it got this high, and although she was darn proud of herself for it, and I wasn't going to take any of that away from her, what it really says is overshooting ketones, your body does not like to waste fuel. And when it gets this high, when it gets in the 5s, when it gets in the 6s, you overshot. And it's great. It's a survival mechanism that's in there for a reason, but it just means you haven't stressed that metabolism like that in a long time. And there's other ways I would stress your metabolism. But don't stop doing it if it worked. So good job. All right. I have a high uric acid. What do I do about it? What do I do about sardines? Oh, and I did a video on this. Yes, sardines have purines in it, when purines are one of the backbones that make up uric acid. But the number one source of the nitrogen and the carbons that fuel the backbones for the uric acid is elevated blood sugar. Again, remember, an elevated blood sugar, when it's above even 105 chronically, it will turn glucose into fructose, and then fructose goes into uric acid. That escape route of what do we do with all this sugar is the number one source of why uric acid is high in Americans, in people that are obese, in people with metabolic disease. When you want to lower the blood uric acid, yes, we can give you medicines that will pee it out, but the key thing is keep the blood sugars under 100. And when you eat, wear a glucose monitor that says you never push that blood sugar above 140 when you eat. If your blood sugar went above 140, you ate too much or you ate too many carbs. There's no other excuse for that. By the time you're at an hour after eating, the blood sugar should be down to 130. By the time you're at 90 minutes, it should be 110. And by the time you're at 2 hours, the blood sugar should be back to the baseline that it was before you ate. If you're doing that, you're not making excessive uric acid. And I contend, you can't believe how hard that is to do. I have a tough time doing that. I have to not go without my CGM, because as soon as I don't have a record of it, then suddenly things end up in my mouth that should not. I shouldn't have that. All right, let's go to the next one. Good question. So sardines aren't your problem. Glucose is your problem. And there's a really good video of that out there that I took time and went through. It might have been a live, it might have been a regular video. To reverse insulin resistance in seniors, get rid of excessive weight, and stave off cognitive decline, how often should you do a 72-hour sardine challenge, and how often should you do a water fast? Dolores, that's a really good question. So what I would want to first see in a sardine challenge is that they are getting good ketones, but not the skyrocket 5 or 6 ketones, meaning the metabolic challenge that you're giving your body is robust, but your body isn't overshooting. That just means your metabolism is in shape. You're in a better place. And it's after that I would then start substituting a water fast. Again, when you put no resources into a metabolically strong system, one that's had a couple of workouts, it's a great response. The patient does really well. Let me just show you this slide from the 21-day again, and say, when I look at, get this out of the way here a little bit. When I look at the start of the blood sugars at the 21-day, and then, this is, again, these are every 200 people's averages. It is not an accident that we do the sardine challenge first. That's probably not exactly what the sardine challenge. Sardine challenge starts here. And you can see the ketones rise and the glucose stop. In some patients, that's the first time they've ever seen their ketones. And again, the class average was 2.7. And that's the first time they've really seen that flip. The following week is a water fast. How long they do the water fast depends on how they are feeling, what their coach says to do, and what I say to do, how the patient feels. But many people are able to get 48 hours plus in that fast. Many of them get to 72 hours plus. But what we're looking for when we do that is we want to see the body respond to the sardines, see the ketones go up, the glucose come down, before we then say, now deny all calories for 72 hours, watch the ketones go up and the glucose go down. And what we look for are symptoms. When the patient says, I don't think I can do it, I don't think I can do it, I'm like, well, everybody can get to 36 hours. You're not going to die from 36 hours of not eating. And I say that with confidence when I look at their glucose and ketones over the previous 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, the whole class is 3 weeks, so the previous 2 weeks. So the question you're asking is, should I do a 72-hour sardine challenge, or how often should I do a 72-hour water fast? What I would be doing is looking at a rhythm that you can predict once a week, once a week, once a week. So I would do the sardine challenge for 2 or 3 weeks. And if you're getting to the end of that 72-hour challenge and the ketones are doing some really nice things, like getting to 2.5, or I mean, whatever mine were today, like getting to around a 3.1, good job. That's a nice, robust stimulus of your metabolism without overshooting it. Now you can try a sardine or a water fast, salt water, black coffee. And it really is a powerful predictor that when they are successful at not overshooting their ketones during a sardine fast, they're going to do a pretty good job at getting the water fast, at least to 60 hours and maybe 72 hours. Okay, good question, Dolores. Donna writes in and says, after 5 days or so, she stopped eating and the sardines and her glucose and ketones went back to where she started. If she did it longer, would it have helped her health? Yes. You know, it is one of those places where I want them to succeed. And you know, when they just are done. I don't think that she thought that they would drop that quick. It's a reflection of the inflammation. What did that was insulin. Her body's just and the high cortisol, all the things we talked about, and what made her acute pain chronic. And I want this woman to reverse all of her problems. She is very dear to me. But if I push her nose into the sardine can and say, eat it, probably not going to go very well. So when she saw what happened, she's like, yeah, I got some work to do. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your choice is going to be, but I am praying and praying and praying it's sardines. So yeah, if she would do it longer, it would be better. Betty says, what are the rules of the sardine challenge? Oh, thank you for asking. That's a good question. So the key, and we made these rules. So you might know that we've done the 21-day class now. This will be our 7th class. And it was after the first class that I had to add some rules to the sardine challenge. Because you know how when you do a water fast, that you eat a meal. And then at the end of the meal, you start the clock and you start your 72-hour fast, right? Well, we had people doing that with the sardine fast. They would start the clock after eating, I don't know, blueberries or some dang thing. And I'm like, no, you can't start the clock of a 72-hour challenge until you swallow the first bite of sardines. And we'd like you to at least begin with a half a can. Most people eat a whole can, but if you're really having a stickler of a time, get a half can in, and that's how the sardine challenge begins. Then, anytime you feel hungry, I don't care if it's at midnight or noon or 6 a.m., you can eat a can of sardines. You can eat as many sardines as you want. We prefer that they're in oil. Some people get real fussy about in olive oil, and so they drain the oil out, put it on their dog food, and then put fresh olive oil in it. I don't care. Do that if you want to. But the sardine challenge then ends. That 72nd hour isn't like a water fast where you get to the end of 72 hours and some people binge. They get to a meal and they go, they celebrate, which is a no-no. Do not do that. That's not helping your health. At the end of the 72-hour challenge, you're eating another can of sardines because satiety will carry you probably until the next day. And that's why when we look at our data, it's the day after the sardine challenge that these numbers are amazing. And again, we're looking for sustainable goals for people. So 72 hours really it's as long as I ever want somebody, especially north of 50, to do a water fast. There are some exceptions that other doctors will talk about, but on this channel, I'm like 72 hours is so much of the benefit of the water fast. And so we put that same parameter on a sardine fast, but just ask Jane. There's no real end if you don't want to. The results, your body will just it will reverse medical problems. Not only is it a decrease in the noise for thinking and obsessing and craving food, your chemistry gets a lot simpler too. Yeah, great question. Sam writes in and says, how can we correct an exaggerated blood glucose increase from eating protein? Yeah, 0 to 5 grams carbs per day, so he's doing that well, but his protein is causing his blood glucose to rise. Almost always, Sam, this is when folks are eating too much processed protein. That's the first thing I would think about. So if your protein is powdered, I'd cut that out. With the exception of creatine, I would cut out any powdered protein if you're having a glucose spike afterwards. The second thing I would be looking at is that you have an exaggerated amount of insulin to anything you chew when it's after sunset. And that rule gets to be earlier in the day the older you get. So if you're 60, I would say you shouldn't be eating anything after 5 o'clock if you get a glucose spike after you eat. So that means eat at 3 o'clock, be done eating by 4 o'clock, and then watch what your glucose does. The glucose shouldn't spike. Almost always people that are having a protein-induced glucose response on their CGM after eating protein, they have severe insulin resistance, and it means the eating window not only needed to be tighter, like a 6-hour eating window, it needed to slide closer to sunrise. And the first day they say, I'm not hungry for breakfast. I'm like, okay, don't eat anything after noon today. And tomorrow, I bet you'll be hungry. If not tomorrow, the next day in the morning, you'll be hungry. That hunger comes from the emptying of that excessive glycogen response. That's probably the most common reason that I see that. Sam, great question. All right, North Americans writes in and says, do you need supplements if you eat only sardines? You need to eat salt, but it's amazing how much is in sardines, especially if you eat the ones with the skin and the heads on. The best absorbable calcium that I know of. So I don't recommend extra supplements when they're doing that. All right, the last question from Dolores. Does the 72-hour sardine challenge lead to any lasting good effects, or are the effects only there as long as you continue the sardines? Now, the whole point, Dolores, is that you should be able to reverse these medical problems by lowering the cytokine storm, that problem that was happening in the patient when she went from acute pain to chronic pain. And the cytokine storm is the beginning, but then it's the rise in cortisol, and it's the terrible sleep, and it's the lack of, if you watched last week's lecture, these 7 pillars that all really predict your health. I tried to put that in today's lecture, but it was just too long. So in the 72 hours, it is just a really good workout for your metabolism. And, what I would love to see this patient do is that she has the noon rule, that anything after 12 o'clock noon is sardines. That's the only thing she gets to eat after lunch. She can have her eggs or bacon in the morning, but sardines after lunch, and watch what happens over the next 4 months. And those ketones in the morning will be amazing. That's really where we're going to reverse that medical problem, reverse that chronic inflammation, get her back to her healthy self, and hopefully see her kicking her heels together instead of dragging her heels. All right, folks, I appreciate you. I will see those of you in San Diego that are going to Low Carb San Diego, and I ask for specific prayers. I'm giving a great menopause talk there, and I am a little nervous as usual. All right, see you guys next week.